All right, I will officially call this inaugural meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order of the 36th special session. Will the secretary please take the roll?
Senator Flores?
Present.
Senator Orenshaw?
Here.
Senator Pizzina? Senator Hansen? Senator Krasner? Senator Ellison? Chair Scheibel?
And I am here. Thank you all for being here and bearing with us as we worked out all of the technical glitches with our hardworking staff at LCB so that we are connected to Las Vegas. We will also have testimony available by phone today. The agenda for this meeting has been posted online. For the remainder of the special session, we will be meeting in this room at the call of the chair periodically to hear the bills that are referred to us. I'm delighted to have everybody here and look forward to having some productive discussions on a couple of different topics throughout the course of what is hopefully a short session. And with that being said, like in regular sessions, we will start the meeting basically with bill hearings. After bill hearings, there will be an opportunity for public comment. Public comment is limited to issues within the jurisdiction of the committee, but outside of the issues related to bills that we hear. In the bill hearings, again, just like regular committee, we will have presentations from bill sponsors. We will allow testimony in support and opposition, and then testimony in neutral. And in this committee, we trust everybody to use their best judgment about where to testify, support, opposition, or neutral. If you want us to pass the bill, testify in support. If you want us to not pass the bill, testify in opposition. If you really don't care, but you really think you have some information that's useful to us, testify in neutral. And with that being said, I will go ahead and move on to our first bill hearing of the day. We are going to take things out of order this afternoon. I will be starting with SB 2 and inviting Mr. Killian up front to testify. If you haven't testified, you may not have testified in this room before. In order to turn the microphone on, there's a button on the table. It looks like a sticker someone left behind. When it turns red, that means your mic is hot and it's time to talk. Thank you. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. I am here today to present to you Senate Bill number 2. This bill may look somewhat familiar. It is very similar to Assembly Bill 600 from the regular session that just concluded. This bill handles 3 housekeeping items for the legislative department of the state government. Since I know there were bill hearings on this during the regular session and the form of this bill is not drastically different, I do not intend to belabor the presentation. But just to flag for the committee the 3 things this bill does. First, in sections 1 and 2, we make some changes to sections of NRS dealing with uses and revenues for the legislative fund. You may have noticed that now both in the north and the south at the legislative complexes there are delis in operation. As a result of that, we've had to make a couple changes to the use of funds in the legislative fund and revenues flowing back into the legislative fund to make sure that the revenues received by those delis stay within the legislative fund. And so in sections 1 and 2, there are relatively limited changes. That's what you will see there. Going out of order real quick because the next one is very simple. In section 4, you will see that NRS 331-135 is amended. This is the section of law that gives the legislature exclusive control over its own properties. As you may recall from the end of the regular session, the acquisition of a plot of land contiguous to the legislative properties here in the north that's a parking lot was authorized for acquisition. That acquisition was successfully completed. The legislature now has ownership of that lot. Section 4 amends NRS 331-135 to include a reference to that lot as one of the properties that the legislature owns. Finally, Section 3 of the bill concerns a Nevada Supreme Court decision that occurred recently. In that decision, the Nevada Supreme Court made some erroneous statements about how NRS is codified and what the placement of things within NRS means. Just as a very brief description of the history, the Nevada Revised Statutes was created by the legislature in 1957. This was the result of a 6-year-long codification process that stretched from 1951 to 1957. During that time, the legislature created a statute revision commission that took all of the statutes of Nevada that existed up to that time and crafted the Nevada Revised Statutes from them. The charge given to the Statute Revision Commission was to organize the Nevada Revised statutes into 4 parts. The first part dealing with remedial laws, the second part dealing with civil laws, the third part dealing with penal laws, and the fourth part dealing with political laws. That's why when you look at NRS, the first few chapters deal with remedies that are available in court. The next few chapters deal with different kinds of civil procedures in courts. The next part deals with different types of criminal procedures in court. And then we have dozens of titles that follow that deal with everything else. That's because the original organization of NRS, the direction given to the Statute Revision Commission was to treat all of that as political material and to organize it by topic. That led to the adoption of Chapter 220 of NRS, which is what gives the Legislative Council the duty to codify and organize the Nevada Revised Statutes. I am directed to do that on the basis of the subject matter of the statutes, not on the basis of which of the 3 branches of state government into which they fall. Unfortunately, the Nevada Supreme Court, I think, concluded that that organization was on the basis of which departments of government things fall into as opposed to by topic. By law, I'm required to organize by topic. And so the language added in Section 3 corrects that issue from the Nevada Supreme Court ruling, finding that NRS was organized by branch rather than by topic. Without this language, I would arguably be required to reorganize all of Nevada Revised Statutes from its current 59 titles into 4 titles, 1 for the executive branch, 1 for the legislative branch, 1 for the judicial branch, and 1 for local governments. I don't think anybody wants that. So this language is to prevent that from happening and to allow the current organization of the Nevada Revised Statutes to continue. Madam Chair, that's all I have on this bill. Happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from members of the committee? We will start with Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Okay, Asher, so this Supreme Court decision, is it causing some sort of major brouhaha in your ranks or something? Or, I mean, what I'm going to ask you is this an extraordinary situation that has to be remedied now rather than wait to a normal session?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. To the Senator, unfortunately, yes. So the first thing we do at the conclusion of a regular session is to codify all of the bills that were passed during the session and publish the new version of NRS. We are in that process right now. In the absence of this fix, I would arguably be required to, during this codification process, recodify all of NRS into 4 titles rather than the current 59 titles. So in the absence of this bill, given that we're presently in the codification process, it may require me to do things that I don't think anyone wants me to do to NRS.
Okay, very good. No, that's what I'll be looking for in all these bills. Is there a reason that we have to have this bill in a special session? Your testimony is, yes, we better get on this right away. So since we have a special session, let's do it. Okay, I'm fine with that. So Madam Chair, if you're at a point you want to make a motion or you want to have more questions?
Let's see if there are other questions and any testimony. Senator Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you. I've run in this before in counties and cities. They had to go back and make up for stuff that was passed over the years, you know. So anyway, I'm glad this is being addressed right now, because 6 months from now, this might create a problem. But how many other bills that you think might be out here that's going to follow the same line? I mean, you catch them as they show up. You can't read all of them, but is there any more other than these that you see that might create a problem?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. Through you to the Senator. At this point, I believe we have...
You can go direct.
Thank you, Chair. I believe we have a reasonable handle on all the legislation that's potentially out there, and I don't foresee the need for any other housekeeping items like this, especially on an emergent basis during a special session as opposed to during the routine course during a regular session.
Any other questions from members of the committee? All right, not seeing any. We thank you so much for your presentation. We will now move into testimony, if there is any, on SB2. Anybody wishing to testify in support of SB2 is invited forward in Carson City or Las Vegas. I do see somebody in Las Vegas, so we will start there. If you could limit your remarks to about 2 minutes or less, we appreciate it for efficiency. And please state your name for the record and the spelling before you begin. Please go ahead whenever you're ready down in Las Vegas.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. My name is Anna Hitbach-Schützen. For the record, that is ANAHITBAGHSHETSYAN, and I'm a policy analyst at Nevada Policy and PRI, whose case was brought forward in Section 3 of this bill. Like during the regular session for the bill AB 600, we wanted to also voice our support for this measure in the special session. It is a common sense, simple cleanup language in the Section 3 part of the bill that simply states that any agency that is affiliated with the government needs to belong within these 3 branches. With the ruling of the Supreme Court, there was some sort of gray 4th branch of NSHE, which put the separation of powers provision of the Constitution to a question. This is a simple common sense reform, and we have consistently been advocating for it. So we urge you to vote yes on the measure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else coming forward to give in-person support testimony on SB2 in either Las Vegas or Carson City, so we'll go to the phones for support testimony on SB2.
Chair, the public lines are open and working. However, there are no callers in support at this time.
All right, then we will go to testimony in opposition to SB2. I don't see anybody coming forward in person here in Carson City or up in Las Vegas, so we'll go back to the phones for testimony in opposition.
Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
All right, anybody in neutral to give in-person testimony here in Carson, down in Las Vegas, or on the phone?
Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
All right, then that brings us to the conclusion of testimony. Unless it looks like we do not have any further remarks from our presenters, then that brings us to the conclusion of our hearing on SB2. I will now close the hearing, and at this time I would accept a motion if anybody wants to move to do pass. All right, second. We have a motion from Senator Pezzina. I will take the second from Senator Krasner. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously to recommend a do pass action for SB2. Thank you all so much. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, our hearing on SB1. I will invite our presenters down to the front, and please get started whenever you are ready.
Good afternoon, Chair, Senators, members of the committee. Warren Hardy here representing Enterprise Mobility. I have at the table with me the always lovely and gracious Charlie De La Paz, whose client was a sponsor of the bill in the last session. I'm going to preempt the question I know Senator Hansen is dying to ask me, and that is, where was I in the legislative session on this bill? I'm going to address that, and I'm also going to address why it rises to the level of a special session action. I've been doing this a long time. I
was going to ask you who cut your hair, but that's another story.
My wife, as a matter of fact. Thank you. That threw me off. So Enterprise Holdings, which is my client, was only sort of peripherally involved in this bill during this session. Some of our Enterprise, as you all know, is a large company. 99.99% of our businesses are owned by the corporation. We don't have, in the United States, we don't have franchisees. We do in the world, but not in the United States. Some of our friends who do have franchisees, as a result of that, have small businesses and family-owned businesses that are involved in this business, wanted to bring forth this legislation to address a particular concern that they had. But the end result, what they wanted to be able to do, because the law prior to the passage of SB 194 said that a rental car company may not deny a rental to a renter simply because they refused to purchase insurance or did not have insurance. On its face, that seems a little crazy, except that in order to be a car rental company, you have to verify that every car you put out on the street has rental insurance coverage up to the state standards. They wanted to go a little further than that and to be able to deny, if you didn't have insurance, were unwilling to purchase insurance, they wanted to be able to deny insurance. We fully supported that. We saw the reason for that. We saw the reason they wanted to do that. My client didn't really have any intention of availing itself of that opportunity, so we sort of watched peripherally. And my request of the sponsors and of the legislators I did speak to was simply, just don't change the way we do business. We like the current statute, we like the current law, we're fine with it. But I want to indicate the sponsors, the proponents of the bill, kept us apprised of every step of the way. The fact that they are here is not a failure on their part to adequately vet the bill. I want to make that very, very clear. So we wanted to support our small franchise partners that wanted to have the ability to do this. We built our business model around not having this. We are a large enough organization that we can absorb the things that concern the smaller franchisees we're able to absorb as a company. So we've made a business decision that we will just continue under the status quo. Again, only asking that our current practice not be interfered with and be allowed to continue. During the process, as I looked back and thought to myself about sort of where this went sideways, it occurred to me, I'm not an attorney, I just play one at the legislature, but so there are a lot of these issues I don't understand, and a lot of the focus during the legislative session, last session, was revolved around the procedural and the administrative effect of this. We received an explanation about what our responsibility was under this bill that we were completely comfortable with at the time. If you look at the first part of the bill, which is existing law, it says, except as otherwise provided in subsection 2, a short-term leaser shall not require the purchase of a waiver of damages, optional insurance, or other optional goods as a condition, or serves as a condition of leasing a passenger car. That was the existing language. We were under the impression that that's the rule. Then there, in subsection 2, there's an exception to the rule, which allows a company to avail themselves of this process to deny a rental to somebody who doesn't have personal insurance. And so we really weren't, those of us who were working with this in the state really kind of missed the shall. The legislation passed, was signed by the governor. I think there were 4 members of the legislature, the Senate Assembly that opposed it, but it was unanimous in the Senate. But we accepted the Legislative Council Bureau's explanation of how this was to work administratively and procedurally. We were told the obligation of the company who wanted to deny it was to ask if they had insurance. If they could not provide that insurance, that was the end of the responsibility of the car rental agency. However, as our risk management folks are wont to do, when they reviewed this, they didn't read subsection 2 as a alternative to section 1. They read it to mean that we now have a statutory obligation to verify insurance. It doesn't say to check the card. It doesn't say to ask for the card. It read, a short-term leaser shall require that a person seeking to lease a passenger car provide proof of insurance that requires the minimum amount of insurance provided in statute. We have no way to do that. We have no ability to do that. And if under the interpretation that we understood that this was an alternative, an option for us to be able to avail ourselves of this process if we wanted to, it wasn't a big deal because we had no intention of availing ourselves of this process. But our folks read it and speaking to the Legislative Counsel Bureau, they concurred that in terms of civil liability, that is potentially a big problem. To put a statutory responsibility and obligation for the rental car industry that we have no possible way to fulfill. It's not logistically possible, it's not technologically possible. So what we're asking for here with this change from may to shall is to really go back simply to what we believed we were, and I think the sponsors will concur, what we believed we were passing in the last session, which is an optional process for companies that wanted to avail them of that process. Why does it rise to the level? So that's the question, how I missed it during session. The question about why does it rise to the level of a special session agenda. Our folks have looked, and again, I will acknowledge, out of an absolute abundance of caution, looked at how they could possibly mitigate what they are concerned about in terms of liability under this statute. And the only thing we can conclude is that the only way to protect ourselves from potential exposure is not guaranteed, it never is, but potential exposure is to require that each of our renters in the state of Nevada purchase the additional insurance, coverage. That will, in some cases, double the cost of a car rental in Nevada, but it will certainly significantly increase the cost of a car rental. So this, I really believe, is a cleanup piece of legislation that better gets to the intent of what we were told and what I believe was represented to be the intent of the legislation. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions or yield to my colleague.
All right, thank you so much. Any questions from members of the committee? All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so we will. Did you have any additional testimony or presentation?
There we go. Charlie De La Paz, for the record, everything that he said was good. I concur. And my client was very clear every time that he went to present in those committee hearings that the intent was to give those smaller guys the option. And so I think everything that that Mr. Hardy here is saying is factual. If you guys have any other questions, we're happy to answer, but it was clear at the time. So just a cleanup.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm still not seeing any questions, so we will invite you to take a seat and open up the floor for testimony in support of SB 1, starting here in person in Carson City. In case you haven't testified in here before, to turn on the microphones, there's a button on the table. It looks like a sticker. When it turns red, that means the mic is hot, and that's the time to speak. Go ahead, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Nice to see y'all. For the record, Andy McKay, I'm the Executive Director of the Franchise Auto Dealers Association. I'll be quick. We testified in support of this bill in both houses, as I think the committee knows and the record reflects. Simply put, we agree with the proposed changes on this thing, and our concern initially when we heard that this was going to be on the table was what we had aimed to accomplish is what Mr. Hardy and Ms. De La Paz put on the record. Was that this change going to impair that? And the simple answer is no, it won't. So we appreciate the committee's time, and we support the literally one-word change. So thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Nick Schneider, Director of Government Affairs for the Vegas Chamber. For the sake of brevity, I will go ahead and concur with what Mr. McKay as well as Mr. Hardy and Ms. De La Paz said. Appreciate the quick cleanup. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else coming forward in support in Carson City or Las Vegas, so we will go to the phones for support testimony on SB 1.
Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
All right, then we will move to opposition on SB 1. Anybody wishing to testify in opposition to SB 1 is invited forward now, but I don't see anybody coming forward in Carson City or Las Vegas, so we'll go back to the phones for opposition testimony on SB 1.
Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
All right, everybody's favorite part, neutral testimony. Anybody wishing to give neutral testimony is invited forward now. Big surprise, I don't see anybody rushing the tables to give neutral testimony in either Carson City or Las Vegas, so we'll go back to the phones, please, for any neutral testimony on SB1.
Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Okay, then that concludes testimony on SB1. Is there a further question from the committee? Okay. Okay, unless there are further remarks from the sponsors of the bill, it looks like we can close out the hearing on SB1, and I am open to a motion from Senator Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I agree with testimony on both sides, so I'd like to make a motion we approve SB1 as submitted.
All right, we have a motion from Senator Ellison to do pass, and a second from Senator Orenshaw. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. All right. The motion passes unanimously to do pass SB1. Unlike with SB2, I have remembered that I have to assign a floor statement to a volunteer, and that volunteer is James Orenshaw. Sorry, Senator Orenshaw. And on SB2, the volunteer to give that floor statement is Senator Pazina. And I believe that brings us to the conclusion of our hearings for this afternoon, leaving only public comment. We are open now for public comment. Anybody wishing to come forward and comment in person is invited to do so. Not seeing anybody in person, we will go to the phones, please, for public comment.
Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
All right, then that brings us to our conclusion of our meeting, and until the next call of the chair, we are adjourned.